Welcome to episode 3 of Ask the Philip Roth Personal Library, where we respond to all the great questions you've posted on our social media accounts. Question 1. Will any of Roth's work be published posthumously? This is probably a question that could be better answered by Roth's literary executors. I haven't seen any unpublished works in our collection, and then after Roth wrote Nemesis in 2010, he focused specifically on reading and learning about American history, so I don't believe he was doing much writing during this time at all. It's possible that one day a scholar might want to compile and publish the correspondence of Philip Roth, and in order to do that, they would need to visit various repositories and locate all his letters. So that could happen one day. Question 2. Did Roth keep any record of his conversations with Saul Bellow? So, Roth and Bellow were friends. Many of Bellow's books in the collection contain marginalia, along with separate loose pages of notes for many of the titles. And as far as written communication, we have just one letter from Bellow to Roth and then an invitation to Saul Bellow's birthday party. So probably Roth's papers at the Library of Congress contain more information. With that said, when we went to pick up the bequest from Roth's home in Connecticut in 2020, we were also instructed to take his music collection. However, this was not written in the terms of the trust. It said something else completely. So we were surprised, but we took the collection. And among the CDs, we found audio cassettes, which we had digitally converted, but we also used Roth's tape recorder to listen to them because his tape recorder works very, very well. These were labeled in Roth's handwriting and included duplicates, and many of these audio cassettes were Roth interviewing Saul Bellow. Just one of those was a phone call that Roth recorded when he called up Saul Bellow and gave him a really hard time after reading Ravelstein because he just couldn't stand the main character. But the other tapes were Roth's attempt to correct James Atlas's biography of Bellow. However, this project just didn't materialize. So we have tapes labeled with the name of a book, such as Humboldt's Gift, Samler's Planet, Herzog, The Adventures of Augie March, and Seize the Day, with hours of questions about the books. But then they also discuss Bellow's childhood, Reichian therapy, look that up if you don't know what that is, anti Semitism, and America. And during these conversations, Roth also talks about himself a lot, not only writing, but books that he enjoyed. Particularly, they talk about Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment quite a bit, different clubs Roth visited, and information about Roth's acquaintances. So they're very interesting, and I'll play a short clip.
What's the setup?
The setup is that you're going to have an innocent prince, moronic prince, inspired, angelic, and he's going to cast his light of understanding over everything that people are doing. But that's Christian baloney to my mind. I never swallowed it. I read it with some sympathy, but I never took it seriously.
Question 3. Why do you continue to refuse to let Blake Bailey visit the library? I'll answer this question in order to correct it. Blake Bailey, Roth's official biographer, did visit the library in 2021 to film a segment for CBS Saturday Morning. You can find that recording on the CBS Morning's Facebook page, and that took place on April 3rd, 2021. Blake Bailey was also slated to speak on June 9th, 2021 on Zoom. At that time, alleged accusations were just beginning to surface, and while we were not all in agreement, administration ultimately decided to cancel the event. I'm not sure why you're using the word continue in your question. As far as I know, he hasn't asked to come back. We've just canceled one appearance. Bailey certainly isn't banned from the building. Question 4. What are the most recently published novels in the collection? I partially addressed this question in episode 2, but that one was broader because the question concerned both fiction and nonfiction. Also keep in mind that Roth wasn't reading much fiction anymore because he was catching up on American history. So books that we found from 2018, the year that Roth passed away, included Lisa Halliday's Asymmetry, Antonio Monda's Unworthy, which contained 2 of Roth's check marks in the book, Tim Park's In Extremis, and Norman Locke, The Wreckage of Eden. And from 2017, Paul Auster, 4321, Miley Malloy, Do Not Become Alarmed, Nicole Krauss, For Is Dark, Gabrielle Talent, My Absolute Darling, Larry McMurthy, Thalia, A Texas Trilogy, Claudio Magris, Blameless, Ivy Pacoda, Wonder Valley, Rachel Cusk, Transit, and Louise Erdrich, Future Home of the Living God. Question 5. What 21st century writers did Philip Roth read? Did he have any favorites? We don't have many interviews in our collection between 2001 and 2018, and as mentioned previously, Roth was receiving books constantly, new books all the time from friends who were authors and also from publishers and from newer authors. And he also supported many young writers. So he may have many works in their collection, but I don't know if I could say those were his favorites because many of them did not have markings. Almost all of them were inscribed to him from the authors. So we could figure out what he was reading, but determining his favorites is a little more challenging. So the answer I will give will not be a precise one, and I'm focusing solely on fiction. Because we have to refer to published interviews and to markings in books to answer this question. So I would say definitely Edna O'Brien. Roth and Edna were friends. He has many of her books and they are inscribed to Roth, and he mentions reading O'Brien in a New York Times article just before his death. Louise Erdrich, Don DeLillo, definitely. An older book of his that Roth raved about was Libra, and even though that was published in the 20th century, DeLillo did publish books after, and he and Roth were friends, and Roth loved DeLillo's work. Amos Oz, Louise Begley, Cynthia Ozick. There are many books in the collection by Joyce Carol Oates, but she and Roth were friends. And Roth supported several younger authors, including Miley Malloy, Nicole Krauss, Rachel Cusk. In fact, his nightstand in his Connecticut home had several books by Cusk on it. Judith Thurman and Frederica Wagman. And then authors who are sort of on the cusp between 20th and 21st would be Dennis Johnson. Roth really supported Johnson, Norman Mania, and Elie Wiesel. Question 6. Did Philip Roth have books on music, music albums, cinema, art? Yes, yes to all, but out of those topics, there are significantly more art books. In terms of music, reference titles include the New College Encyclopedia on Music, the New Penguin Guide to Compact Discs and Cassettes, and other titles such as the Paris Diary of Ned Rorem and biographies of Bach, Mahler, and Wagner. And what's interesting, a few months before his death, Roth mentioned in a New York Times article how much he enjoyed reading Bruce Springsteen's biography, but for some reason that book just isn't here. And we also received Roth's vinyl record collection Unfortunately, we don't have his turntable because that was sold at auction, but the record collection consists of a mix of classical, spoken word, jazz, opera, and even rock. If you have more specific questions about the collection, do let me know and I'll address them in the next episode. In terms of art, many books. Roth was friends with both Philip Guston and Tommy Ungerer, so there are exhibition catalogs and other art books, many of them signed by those artists. And in addition to that, art books on Picasso, Otto Dix, Gauguin, Hockney, de Kooning, Ernst, and Kitaj. And regarding cinema, not that many. Some of the titles include the New Biographical Dictionary of Film, Conversations Between Shadow and Light, Italian Cinematography, and Living Images, Film Comment and Criticism. Question 7. How were the books organized? They were organized according to the Philip Roth system. So I'll start off with the books in New York because we were allowed to pick those up first. The books were shelved in primarily two spaces, in the bedroom and in the living room. So in the bedroom, a few shelves of fiction arranged alphabetically by author's last name. And then because Roth by that time was reading primarily nonfiction, the remainder of the shelves were nonfiction, shelved in the same way. He quickly ran out of room, so then there were piles of books on top of the shelves and random clusters of books that weren't shelved in between. So, for example, there was a pile of books on polio that Roth was reading while writing Nemesis, and on one of the bottom shelves, random books, including the For Dummies series, such as iPhone for Dummies. Some of them are actually did have check marks and post-it notes, so you'll see a picture of those in a little bit. And then in the living room, mostly books on the United States, wars, political history, again, shelved by author's last name. And then if you've seen some of the photos I've posted previously, piles of books on the coffee table, piles of books underneath the table, and larger coffee table sized books on baseball, art, and history on a long table that was located near the kitchen. Proceeding to the estate in Connecticut, I'll begin with the writing studio, which was just a short distance away from the main house. That served a purpose because the books in that space were the research materials Roth used while writing Nemesis and the Plot Against America. So there were groupings of books on presidential elections, for example, politics, Charles Lindbergh, and groupings on polio, Newark, and then towards the end of the bookshelf, some reference materials that were unrelated, such as walks in Connecticut and wildflower identification guides. Returning to the main house, I'll begin with the bedrooms upstairs. One bedroom just had a pile of books on the nightstand. Another bedroom had a closet full of foreign editions of Roth's works. And then the largest of the bedrooms had two built-in bookcases, which contained anthologies, poetry, and drama. And we found a lot of Claire Bloom's books in this space. Going downstairs, there was a living room and another room which we'll call the parlor. And those two rooms contained the fiction. So half of the fiction was shelved in the parlor, and the other half was in the living room, along with CDs and movies. And there were cupboards underneath the built-in bookcases in the living room, which contained books that had belonged to either Barbara Sproul or Philip Roth and Barbara Sproul. Sproul was Philip's partner in the 70s and lived with him in Connecticut. Those books were primarily travel books because they ventured to different places together, and also books on gardening. In the kitchen, a few cooking books, and in the largest room, which we call the library room, where Philip Roth actually installed metal shelving and large fluorescent lights, which look like the stacks of the Newark Public Library. That room contained over 3,000 nonfiction books, again, very well organized by either author's last name or the person who a biography is about. But there were also little groupings, so books on baseball, for example, books on Jewish studies. One shelf area had books on art, and then another section had his first editions and books that were very special to him. So, for example, books that he had inscribed to his parents that he received back after their death. What's also interesting that in the catalog that we published in 2022, right here, one of the essays by a scholar mentions that she helped Roth organize. So there was renovation going on in his house, and she was actually given a color-coded map of where books belonged. And I also know that he relied upon a librarian of the Litchfield Library to help him organize, because imagine he's receiving new books in the mail all the time. So books need to be shifted and the new books need to be put into place. So I hope that explains a little bit. And maybe when you come and visit and you take a look around the shelves, you'll see the organization.